if you're thinking about taking your business international, don't be afraid. It's easier than you think. And if we're talking about your career, I just say make sure that you do something that you love. Be brave and don't be discouraged if things don't work out exactly how you think they're going to. And if you don't go in a straight line, well, that's okay. There are many ways to be right. If you have to do a zigzag to get where you want to go, or even if you wind up somewhere totally different, as long as you're waking up every day happy and enjoying what you're doing, that is really all that matters.
Hi, it's great to have you on Your Career Podcast. I'm Jane Jackson, and thank you for listening. If you're a new listener, why not subscribe to this podcast so you're the first to listen to each new episode that'll provide inspiration in your career? Just go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio if you use an Android device and click subscribe. I've also a free Kickstart Your Career audio course that you can find on my Facebook page at facebook.com/Jane Career Coach. See you there.
Welcome to Jane Jackson Careers, a podcast that takes your career to the next level. Here's your host, Jane Jackson, author of Amazon Careers bestseller, Navigating Career Crossroads.
Well, hello and welcome back to my Careers Podcast, where I interview fascinating professionals who've made amazing career changes. Now, today I have with me Cynthia Dearin, who I've known for a few years, and she's really an interesting lady. You're going to enjoy this podcast episode because she is an international business strategist, advisor, keynote speaker, and author of Amazon bestseller Camels, Sheiks, and Billionaires, Your Guide to Business Culture in the Middle East and North Africa. Now that's fascinating, isn't it? Not only that, with 18 years of international experience, she is the founder and managing director of Dearin Associates, a consultancy that helps clients to access opportunities and capital in fast-growing international markets, including the Middle East, North Africa, Iran, China, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Now, before founding Dearin & Associates, Cynthia worked extensively internationally as an Australian diplomat and a management consultant. She also spent 3 years as the CEO of the Australian Arab Chamber of Commerce and Industry. She's proficient in Arabic and French, both of which she uses professionally. I'm so impressed. I only speak Cantonese and English, but Arabic and French is unusual, isn't it? That's great. And she's an Australian qualified lawyer, holds a Master of Science in Middle East Politics from the School of Oriental and African Studies in the University of London, and a Bachelor of Laws, Bachelor of International Studies from the University of Technology in Sydney. Now, this is one talented lady, so welcome to the show, Cynthia.
Thanks, Jane. It's great to be with you.
Yeah, I'm so glad that I managed to catch you because you're so busy and you know, you do a lot of travel and so many meetings and you've got lots of speaking engagements and you've got your amazing book as well, which has got such a fantastic name. But as you know, this podcast is all about how you manage amazing career transitions, and you've had quite a number. So how about, just to kick us off, tell us a little bit about your early career aspirations when you were a young girl.
Sure. Well, you know, I think like a lot of children, I had no clue what I really wanted to be when I grew up, when I was small. But people would ask me quite frequently. And I got a little bit tired of having to try and invent answers. So when I was 12, my parents had this crazy idea that they would drag us around the world for 3 months. So they took us to Singapore and then off to Russia, which was still under communist rule, and then to London. And we were in all those places for a different length of time. And during that time, my father said to me, well, maybe you would like to become a diplomat. And I said, oh, well, what's a diplomat? And my dad did his best to explain what that was. And because we had this experience of travel and living abroad for several months, I think that was really formative for me. And so from about that time, whenever somebody would ask me what it was that I wanted to do when I grew up, partially because I was interested in it and partially to get them off my case, I would just tell them that I wanted to be a diplomat. And so that was, you know, that was something I was really keen on. I was also really keen on teaching, as it turns out. And, you know, when I was small, I used to spend a lot of time actually writing curricula for imaginary schools and drawing up architectural plans and that kind of thing. So I had a couple of directions that I was quite keen on, but those were probably the two main ones. Oh, I should also say, I went through a phase for quite a lot of years of wanting to start a business. So we lived in the country at that stage. I was born in Sydney, but we moved to Tamworth in northern New South Wales when I was 7. I had lots of goes at trying to create a business. I remember I created one called Toy Box Products, which I think was drawstring bags and scrunchies when I was about 10. And so I came up with all these ideas, but my biggest challenge was always distribution. So the idea was great and the product was great, but actually getting it out into the market as a 10-year-old living in the middle of the country before internet was something of a challenge. So, those things never really got off the ground. But those are the kind of things that I wanted to do when I was a kid.
Mm-hmm. Sounds like you had a very much an entrepreneurial mindset from the early days, and not having the distribution. It kind of ties in very much with what you're doing today, and we'll be getting to that as well. But so an interesting childhood. You got to travel. You were thinking of lots of different things. But you know what? For most children, when they're under the age of 10, they don't even know what the word diplomat means. So that opened up a whole world of possibilities for you.
Well, my parents were very keen on giving us the broadest range of experiences that they could. And so they really wanted us to be able to go anywhere, do anything, mix with anyone. And they tried to just give us as many opportunities to experience different things as possible. And I think that's probably what it was about. And also they never ever said that I couldn't do something. So whatever I wanted to do, they would try and facilitate. And every time I asked my father whether some crazy scheme of mine or other was doable, he would say very cryptically, nothing is impossible. So I think some of that kind of rubbed off. But look, I did some crazy things, Jane. At one stage, I kind of coerced my parents into helping me organize a horse camp, where I got kids from all around the district to come and pay money to learn to do riding for a week during the Easter holidays. I think people used to hate me because of the things that I came up with and forced them into. I had another business called Beauvalon Bakery that I made up a jingle for, and it had baked products, but again, distribution was a huge problem. I tried to start a newspaper with my friends who lived in Sydney, and we would post things to each other back and forward, and we would write things up on like an old Apple computer. But again, these things often fell apart. With the newspaper, it was when my mother said, well, look, this is all good, but how will you actually pay? Printing is very expensive. This is in the 80s. How are you going to print it and how are you going to distribute it? And I kind of went, I guess I won't be able to do it. So, I kind of wish I'd been born in the internet age, because I'm pretty sure I would have had my own online newspaper.
I was just thinking as you were saying all of these things, you were just ahead of your time.
I was a frustrated online journalist.
Totally ahead of your time. And just think, if you were to do all of that now, some lucky 10-year-old is going to get really inspired by you now. Well, because they can get up and running, within a day or two, because of everything, on the internet now.
It just blows my mind, the opportunities that even, relatively young children have. My little boy is 18 months old. I am fascinated to see what he is going to come up with by the time he's about 10 or 12. I think it's going to be hilarious.
Yeah. Well, I think with grandparents like your parents, because so inspiring for you as well, with your entrepreneurial mindset and amazing background, which we need to find out about. I think your 18-month-old has got a really good start in the world. Okay.
We'll
so back to you, Cynthia. Okay. So from those early aspirations, when you first graduated, and then or before you graduated, when you decided on the subjects that you wanted to study, and then when you launched yourself into the world of work in the early days, tell us a little bit about those transitions that you made before you got to where you are today with Dearin Associates.
So I graduated, I did my HSC here in Australia, and I decided I would do a law degree. Now, I didn't do a law degree because I wanted to become a lawyer. I did a law degree because I knew that the diplomatic corps was well known for often recruiting people with a law degree. And I said, well, I want to get into the diplomatic corps, so I will do this law degree. Now, I did the law degree. I have to say, I did really well at it, but 70% of it I absolutely hated. I nearly dropped out in the second year because I got so depressed about the fact that I hated what I was studying so much. But apparently I'm fairly stubborn, because I kept going, and I came out of it with a first-class honours degree, so that was fine. And then everyone said, well, obviously, you're going to apply to go to one of the large firms, right? And I'd already decided, because I'd worked in a few firms as a paralegal by then, I just thought, this is not for me. I think this is going to make me really unhappy. There are only bits of the law degree that I liked. I liked all the esoteric stuff, which I couldn't actually use in a job. So, subjects like women in the law or international law, where there's almost no work going. And things like sale of goods and real property. I remember with a real property exam, I wanted to throw myself down the staircase because I was so freaked out about it and I was going to fail. But I figured that a broken arm would just postpone the exam for a couple of weeks. So I really didn't want to be a lawyer. So I didn't apply to go to any law firms at all. I applied for a few management consulting firms, and I always washed out a couple of rounds into that process. So there was something about how I was that was not a fit for that environment. But at the same time, I also applied to go into the Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade as a graduate. And that was sometimes, that was, I think the transition out of university into the world of work was quite difficult for me. I remember getting to the end of the degree and just feeling, or being in that final year of my honours and thinking, I don't know what I want to do. I know I don't want to become a lawyer. Maybe this management consultancy thing. And then seeing the application for Foreign Affairs and Trade come up and thinking, oh, that's right. I've been saying since I was little that I wanted to do this. I should apply for it. Now, I remember, this seems to be a common theme in my life when I'm doing transitions. I remember the day I applied for it online. It was right back when online applications were in their infancy. I think it took me like 3 goes and the thing crashed halfway through. And I was in a really bad frame of mind. And I was like, oh my gosh, why am I doing this? But I applied. I went through and did. You had to do an exam back then to get in, a couple of rounds of interviews, and I wound up getting into Foreign Affairs and Trade as a graduate trainee. And so I was like, wow, well, this is what I said I wanted to do. So I packed up my bags in February 2001, and I moved down to Canberra to actually to take up that position there. And I basically went and became a graduate trainee. I suppose there are a couple of things that probably added to getting into Foreign Affairs and Trade besides the law degree, and that was that my degree was International Studies and Law. And so I'd done French and Japanese at school, and I had to go and spend a year studying in a non-English speaking country. So I went and spent a year at university in France. And then I went back the following year and I harassed the people at Austrade, so the Australian Trade Commission. I went and harassed them until they gave me an internship. And I went and they said, well, we can't really pay you very much. How will you do this? And I said, oh, well, I will use my own money and for part of it, and then I will make up the difference with whatever small amount you guys paid me. And so I went and actually worked in Paris for 4 months on a big education and language-related trade fair where Australia was the host, or rather the guest of honour, because it was 2000, it was our bicentenary. So I think that was a real contributing factor to me then getting that spot in DFAT. But that was another really fascinating experience that just kept me interested and inspired where international things were concerned.
Yeah, I think what's inspiring for me hearing that story is your tenacity 17 years ago, because even though you thought, okay, well, this is the path that I think I want. And then when there were opportunities that presented themselves, you actually went out and got them. And, you were convincing people that, give me a go. And even if it's an internship, this is what I want to do. You were gaining such valuable experience. And I mean, that's what we have to do in order to get what we want in life, isn't it?
It's true. But look, I have to say, I think so much of that came from my family. And I think this is often the case. I've been so fortunate because at every step of the way, my family would back me up. And they would say, if you want this, you will have to go out and get it. I mean, I remember with the internship, I emailed and there was a bit of back and forth and then it went quiet. And they said, but surely you're not going to travel all the way here from Australia and find somewhere to live for a few months and do it, are you? And I said, what am I going to do? My mother said, well, just tell them that you'll do it. And then we were over. I took my parents back to France the summer before it started, and she said, you will get in touch with the person that you've been speaking to and tell them you want to take them to lunch. I was like, what? I hadn't heard of this concept of taking people to lunch before. And she said,
networking. How good is that?
Take them to lunch and, take them to lunch and tell them what you want to do and that you're really serious. And so I did. Went and took, and I'm still friends with that person. This is 20 years later. I was actually speaking to him at an event the other day, And somebody very senior said, oh, Cynthia and Nick, do you know each other? And I said, yeah, look, Nick and I have known each other for last 20 years. He gave me my first international job as an intern at Austrade. But really, a lot of that has come from my family, because they would back me up and encourage me and say, just take the next step, take the next step, take the next step. Just keep asking until somebody turns you down.
Yeah. It makes such a difference when that you've got people on your side to say, look, if it works out, great. If it doesn't, it's okay. We still love you.
Absolutely.
Behind you to still keep going. And I think the key is you never give up. If you want something, you don't. You just give it a go, because the benefits are huge. And on the downside, it's okay. Well, you develop resilience, don't you?
Absolutely. And look, it doesn't always work out the way you want. And sometimes that's really demoralizing. But a lot of it is just about being able to pick yourself up again and say, okay, well, that didn't work and that's a shame. Well, what else can we do?
Yeah. So tell me, how did things progress from there?
So I joined Foreign Affairs and Trade, as I said, in 2001. As a grad trainee, and you started grad traineeship by rotating through various areas of the department. But at that time, they promised everybody who was a graduate trainee that they would have a posting within 2 years of joining, which is great, because obviously one of the reasons that you join Foreign Affairs and Trade is so that you can work overseas. So, I remember when the round for postings came out, I went and applied, and I applied for Colombo, Noumea, and Japan. I applied for Colombo because I thought that would be interesting, and I applied for Noumea because it's French-speaking and I speak French, and I applied for Japan because at that stage I still had Japanese. I've lost it all by now, but at that stage my Japanese was still okay, and I thought, well, these all make sense as places to go. The thing is, when you apply for a round of postings at Foreign Affairs and Trade, you are essentially saying that you are open to being posted anywhere in the world. And so I went down to the staffing department to find a posting list, and I got pulled aside and somebody said to me, oh, tell me why you wouldn't want to go and work in the United Arab Emirates. And I went, or they said in Abu Dhabi. And I said, where is that? Is that like, I'm thinking in my mind, is it like Amsterdam? I don't even know where it is. So essentially, for my sins, Foreign Affairs and Trade said, oh, you have language aptitude. And I went, oh, yeah, I know. And so we would like you to study Arabic and then be posted to Abu Dhabi. And I was completely freaked out, Jane. I was so freaked out I had to go out and walk around the block a few times to calm down. But it took me about a week to make up my mind. I was so intimidated by my employer that I just capitulated and I went, okay, I'll do it. So I packed up a few months later and went off to Egypt and studied Arabic. And then, a year or maybe 15 months after that, I went off to the UAE and I was posted to Abu Dhabi. Now, after a time, I went back to Canberra and I was working back in Canberra on trade negotiations. And I had, without going into too much detail, I had some negative experiences on posting, which kind of indicated to me that my employer didn't really care much for my well-being in the way that I felt that they should. And I'd also begun to feel, although being a grad trainee was fantastic, I discovered that when you come back from posting, you kind of get lumped into this huge organization and you lose the kind of status that you have when you're a grad, and so everything really slows down. So you go from being at post where you have a lot of autonomy to do what you want to being back in this big bureaucratic organization. And I came back and I felt that I couldn't really make a contribution that I wanted, and that every time I asked if I could do something, somebody would say to me, no, you're not senior enough. And I like to get things done. So after a while, I became really demoralized. I remember sitting there looking out the plate glass window and wondering if I should punch out the plate glass and jump down to the duck pond, even though it was 1 or 2 stories. It wasn't that far. But I felt that I was really stuck. And I also looked around and saw all these very, very bright people who had PhDs and this thing and that thing, still stuck in this large government organization at a relatively low level, even though they'd been there for 10 to 15 years. And I just thought, this is not the right place for me.
The big system. It's interesting. You're talking about, when you were a fresh grad, the opportunities were there.
Yeah.
So often organizations, regardless of size really, they treat their young graduates so well.
Yeah.
Because you do your rotations and you get all your opportunities and you're amazing because you're the cream of the crop.
Yeah.
And then when that grad program is over, and especially if you've gone overseas, and in Australia there's this thing, you've been overseas, you've lost touch. Yeah. And sometimes it's a little bit like that, isn't it? Oh, you haven't had the Australian experience. But then once you finish that grad program, then it's like, okay, now it's time for you to do your time. And I've worked with some organizations where the graduates have felt frustrated because after the grad programs are over, where they were treated very, very well, suddenly, I'm just an employee now. And 2, 3, 4, 5 years go by and they think, what's going on? It all happened so fast.
Yeah.
A while, and then suddenly I'm stalled. And while you're busy doing your time, and exactly as you've said, you're looking around at all of these highly educated, amazing people who 10 years down the track still haven't got to wherever it is that they might have wanted to be. And so was that the beginning of you thinking, okay.
It didn't even take me a few years. It took me 6 months. So I was already thinking on posting, I don't think this is right for me long term. And some people who are in the department had said to me, if you don't want to do this for your entire life, do 5 years and then get out. Because otherwise, working for a department like Foreign Affairs and Trade is not like working in a law firm or working for an accounting firm. If you don't like it, you can't switch to another Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade. There is only one. And so if you don't want to do that long term, you need to think about that ahead of time, because what happens is you get your skill set kind of goes in a direction which is, it's a very sort of specialized direction. And it doesn't really apply to any other things. And look, I have to say also, I didn't feel that my skills were really improving while I was there. And the final straw really came when I had gone and learned Arabic. My Arabic was pretty fluent. I could read, I could write. I thought, look, I don't want to be a generalist. I don't think I've made all this effort to learn. I've been asked to do Arabic. I've gone off. I've done that. I've made a huge investment in it. I'm not saying I want to do it forever, but let's get a bit of specialization. And I applied to do a Master of Middle East Politics in London at the School of Oriental and African Studies. And I was accepted. I got in and I went to the staffing department and said, may I have a year of leave without pay to go to London and do my master's? And they said, no, we need you here. And I said, well, why won't you let me go? And they said, oh, well, we think if we let you go, then you won't come back. And I said, well, if you don't let me go, I'm not coming back either. So could I please go? And they said, no, we're not going to let you go. And I said, fine, guys, I'm quitting. And I did. It was really, really scary. And I kind of was like, oh my gosh, this is a crazy decision. But I was really not happy. And so I thought, well, I don't care. I don't want to stay here forever. I want to go get some specialization. I'm going to take the risk. So I quit. I moved back to Sydney for a couple of months. I did a really brief stint at a law firm to kind of just make sure that I really didn't want to be a lawyer. And I was at a firm with some really nice people, but they were trying to turn me into a property lawyer, and I just couldn't. I just hated it so much that I went back and checked for a few months, and then I was like, I can't do this. And I remember saying to my parents, am I crazy to go off to London? Should I just stay here in Sydney and be sensible? And they said, are you for real? You got into a master's in a great school, just go. And I said, well, what will I do if I can't find a job afterwards? And they said, oh, well, we'll figure it out. Like, I don't know. We'll just figure it out once you do it. So don't worry about that now. Just go and do the master's. And so that was 2005, packed up and moved to London by myself and did the master's, which was just amazing. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. I can't believe it's already more than 10 years ago that I completed it, but it was one of the best things I ever did. And then once I had finished that, I had thought, look, I really need a bit more time back in the Middle East if I want to say I'm a specialist. So I started asking around, and, it's like, I think for so many of these things, the career progression happens through networking. So I had a colleague called Glada Lan at Chatham House. And I remember we went to it was a sit-in protest for the war in Lebanon. It was the Wear White protest outside number 10 Downing Street. So we were there wearing white clothes on a hot summer afternoon in August and talking away, and she asked me, what are you going to do once you finish the master's? You're handing in your thesis in a few weeks. What are you going to do? And I said, yeah, I think I need some more time in country. Like, who do you think I should talk to? And she said, oh, it's really interesting. I had a meeting with some guys from a company called Adam Smith International just a few days ago. they're looking for people in places like Libya and Iraq. What do you think? And I went, Now, this was in 2006 by this stage. So this was right in the middle of the Iraq War.
Yeah.
But because apparently I'm a bit nuts, I went off and got in touch with the person she put me in touch with, and I think I wrote to them on a Monday by email. I was in their office on Tuesday afternoon, and on Wednesday they offered me a job to actually go to Iraq.
Brave woman. Yes, okay. You were up for the challenge.
I was. So I thought, well, I'll just go and do 6 months in Iraq because then I can legitimately say I've had a bit more Middle East experience. So I think I went back to Australia for a couple of weeks and then got ready and went out to Iraq. 6 months turned into nearly 4 years. So I transitioned from being a diplomat to a master's student to a management consultant within the space of a year. And then I was on a series of consulting projects. So I was first with the British government for several months. I then did an EU contract for a very short time, replacing somebody who'd broken their leg in Belgrade, slipping on black ice on leave home. Once that was over, by the time that contract was over, I'd picked up another contract with the US government working with a firm called Bearing Point, which is a KPMG spin-off. And I did that for 18 months, and I only rolled off that project because the war situation, the post-conflict situation really heated up, and we had people kidnapped off our project, and some of those people did not ever come back. So they were basically political casualties of the conflict. We went through a period of time where we were very heavily rocketed, and we lost 5 people up the road at the American Embassy, which was 500 meters away from where we were located. And at that point I said to my boss, this project is not going super well. I don't think it's doing much for my career, and I'm a bit concerned that I'm not going to see out the weekend at the rate we're getting hit with rockets. This was sitting in my trailer on a Friday wearing body armor and a helmet, and just being aware that if a rocket came down on my trailer, there was absolutely nothing I could do. So I rolled off that project after a year and a half, and then I went back to London and kept working for Bearing Point on different projects. And then I was recruited back to Iraq in October of 2008, once the situation had really calmed down, on a much better contract. So, there was this massive step change. I was suddenly hired back because I had Arabic, because I had law, and because I'd already worked there. And that was probably my favorite project ever. So I was working on economic reconstruction for the US Department of Defense. And we were doing things like looking at legal contracts that oil companies were signing with foreign companies and making sure that they didn't get ripped off. I was creating legal English training for attorneys and translators from the Ministry of Oil. So I was getting to do some of these things that came from my past. The teaching bit, which I'm so keen on, was there. The Arabic was there. The international piece was there. So I really, really enjoyed that. And that contract finished in 2010, and I had the option of either continuing on to Afghanistan. I was really homesick by then because I'd been bouncing around the world since 1998, because I'd also been to university in France, and I'd essentially moved internationally every 18 months for a decade. And so at that point, anytime somebody mentioned moving to a new place, tears would spring into my eyes, and I would start to feel like I was going to cry. And I thought, I think it's time to go home. I don't think I've been in Iraq 4 years. I'm not sure I can actually handle going to Afghanistan on the back of Iraq and the UAE and London and Egypt. So I actually moved back to Australia in 2010, and I took up a role as the CEO of the Australia Arab Chamber of Commerce. So, I shifted sectors again. I went from private sector, kind of big corporate, but big corporate in a crazy post-conflict environment, back to industry association in Sydney. And I did that for 2.5 years. And that was, that came with its own set of challenges. I have to say that was probably the most political and most difficult environment that I ever had to work in. And I found it really difficult being a female CEO with a board comprised pretty much entirely of old white guys, where there was lots and lots of politics going on. So we made some really huge changes while I was there. I led a a rebrand and reposition of the entire organization, and basically took it from being an organization that nobody had ever heard of to an organization where we had 2 international conferences 2 years running, and we had trade ministers and government reps from the Arab world coming out to Australia. And that was all great, but after about 2.5 years of that, I just thought, I can't handle the politics of this anymore. I'm having to fight battles all the time to do things, and it's just, it's time for me to do something new. So I had actually, and look, I'm sure some of the people listening to this will understand this experience, Jen. I had been looking around for about a year before I decided that I would actually leave to find something that suited better. But coming back to Australia from abroad was very, very difficult, because people would look at my CV and say, oh, we love your CV. Oh, it's so exotic. We have no idea what to do with you.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking, because
and I'd point out, well, look, I would point out I have all these transferable skills. I've been rebuilding another country. I can problem solve. Can you not find something for me to do? And everybody was like, oh, you don't have any local experience. No, can't hire you. And I found that really difficult. So, I went from having a really senior position for my age. So I was a 1 level below director in a big 5 consulting company out of the States, back to Australia, where suddenly I couldn't even get anything that was a job outside this very specialized area of the Arab world. And I have to say, I found it really disheartening. So I was just, it did really bad things for my confidence. And I just thought, how will I ever find another job? I think I'm unemployable. Maybe it's me.
Yeah. It's interesting, because when you think about everything that you've been through, so it's also, it's the physical challenges of being in a highly volatile environment where, there were rockets going off, and also your personal safety was at risk as well, and yet still getting the job done, to, being a leader within an organization where you also had to do battle with being a female in a leadership position with a lot of males who probably would have been a very challenging environment for you to get your ideas and to get things implemented, as a woman as well. There's so many challenges, but you've had such resilience and tenacity in order to be able to get through all of that. And I'm just thinking as well, it would have just played havoc with your personal life.
It did, to be really transparent. A lot of people don't know this, but I met somebody in Iraq and married that person, and then they moved back to Australia with me, and for a whole variety of reasons. But I'm sure that all the difficult circumstances were a contributing factor. That did not work out, and so we were together for about 7 years in total, and then it just broke up. And a lot of that was cultural differences and all that kind of stuff. But also, I think all those difficult environments do put you under, and your relationships under, a huge amount of strain.
That's right. And sometimes when you're in a challenging environment, you kind of pull together, we're in this together. And then when you're in a non-conflict zone, you come back to Australia and it's just like normal life again. The whole dynamic would change, wouldn't it? And so
that's absolutely right. And look, one of my top tips is to people who are like traveling and working abroad, don't ever get married to somebody you meet in a war zone.
Wise advice, Cynthia Dearin. Thank you for sharing that. I'll take note of that next time I'm in a war zone. Okay, now what I want to do now is, moving forward, Dearin and Associates. You are doing incredible work with Dearin and Associates and helping businesses, to actually gain the capital and also to develop opportunities so that businesses can grow overseas. You had this focus originally on the Middle East, and now you've expanded into the Asia Pacific region as well. Tell me a little bit about this. You started your own business, Dearin Associates. What does it do, and what is it that you offer?
Sure. So essentially, we're an international business consulting firm that helps companies to take what they do well in the home market and to expand it internationally, and for the ones who are really good at it, globally, so all over the place. Now, Why do we do this? Well, essentially, my experience abroad and my experience, in particular running a Chamber of Commerce, really demonstrated to me that there's never been a better time for companies to look internationally, because barriers to entry are so much lower than they've ever been in the past. And at the same time, there is a real lack of capacity in especially the micro to medium sector, but across the business community where international business is concerned. So what I mean by that is that there are loads more opportunities for people to operate internationally, and there is a real imperative for them to do that, but companies don't know how. So the vast majority of companies don't have the time, the resources, or the expertise to actually get themselves internationally ready and then to go into the international space and make a success of it. So we help companies to do that. And the kind of the flagship product that we have is a thing called the International Business Accelerator, which is a program specifically designed to speed up and de-risk that process of internationalization for micro to medium-sized companies.
Okay, I mean, that would be so valuable, because so many organizations don't know how to do this. And having someone who understands the region that they're trying to expand into, almost like hand-holding in a way, so that you can speed up that process is really valuable. So it's called the International Business Accelerator?
Yes.
Yeah. And you'll be having these on an ongoing basis throughout the year, or is it just a one-off?
Yes, we run them on a rolling basis, and just depending on, it's sort of dependent on when we fill a group, but we prefer it if we can actually run them quarterly, and we can have a cohort starting every few months and then going through. So the program itself goes for around 12 months, although we're adding a lot of material in as we go. So it's starting to become a little bit longer because there are more things that people have asked us to cover. And essentially the way it works is that you come along and you join a group of like-minded visionary business owners who are all striving to take their business international. And it's a combination of skills and knowledge. So we actually teach piece by piece all the things that you need to do and all the questions you need to answer to make sure that your company can successfully internationalize. There's also an individual coaching piece. So we coach companies one-on-one to get them ready to go overseas and to work on their specific challenges. We also partner them up with an accountability buddy out of the program. So they're working with another company who's also internationalizing. And usually the companies have nothing in common with each other, but they come at these questions from different perspectives. And people find that really helpful, to get feedback from other people. And they also just find that it keeps them on track because they're checking in with somebody every week or two. And so there's a real imperative for them to have got all their assignments and their pieces of homework finished. And then there's a community piece. So we are curating a series of partnerships with different companies who can help all of our clients to go overseas. So we work with government departments who provide financing. We work with accountants who give specialized international tax advice. We work with consultants who can help you to get a grant so you can get half the money that you spend on marketing internationally back. We work with lawyers, we work with translation companies. So we're really trying to create a community where you can go and get the support you need from people that we know are likable and trustworthy and will do a great job at helping you to take your company offshore.
Yeah, it's so important to have that pool of professionals who are able to assist when it comes to liaising with certain governments and obviously all the tax implications, because it gets so complicated in certain countries as well. So you help organizations in any industry? In any industry and also in any country, because the program at this point in time runs entirely digitally. So we run it on a platform called Zoom, and we can meet up with the class meets up and we can all see each other and talk and ask questions, but it's digital. And that we found that that's really great for people who are scattered across the world because they don't have to travel to access the knowledge and the community. It's great for people, if we're talking about Australia, in rural, regional and remote Australia, because they don't have to get in a car and drive to Sydney or a major centre to attend. And it's great for busy working mums who are chained to the house at all hours of the day because they can come to the class if they can get there, or if they can't, then we record all the sessions so they can actually just go and download their session and watch it at
a time that works for them.
Yeah, it's exactly like we're doing now, because this is being recorded via Zoom.
Yeah.
And I know with all of my coaching, because I have clients who are overseas as well, you don't need to fly in, or you don't need to travel or drive or park, and it makes it so much easier. And I think the most valuable thing is being able to record the sessions so that you can provide those to, everyone who has dialed in for your group meetings or individual meetings, and use it as an ongoing resource moving forward. So I think that's valuable. That's a really comprehensive 12-month program that you've put together, Cynthia. I think it's going to help a lot of businesses who may be just a little bit fearful of expanding overseas. And so with that guidance, and especially having an accountability buddy to keep you going when the going gets tough, and it will the going does get tough, doesn't it?
Yes, it does at times.
So your first one is launching on the 24th of January. Yeah.
So our first one launched in May this year, and this will actually be our third group. Well, our open day is on the 24th of January, and then we kick off in February. So yeah, we're getting started early in the year so that people can hit the ground running and actually get their international planning off to a start early in 2018.
Yeah. And if they miss that one, then in the next quarter, there will be another one. So you're going to have this ongoing process, over the years as well, where more and more businesses will join and go through the process. And I look forward to hearing all the success stories.
Well, look, my wild ambition is that in the next decade, we actually manage to reach 1 million businesses around the world, because I see so much opportunity, especially for the micro to medium sector. I see an opportunity for people to transform their lives and the communities around them by the contributions that they can make. And I'm really excited that we can have a role in making that happen, to affect change for people personally, for communities, and on a big scale to really empower economies to do better by helping all those small players to actually grow and reach customers in other markets.
Yeah. I mean, that's so important too. So you've obviously got your heart in the right place. So, to run a commercial concern that actually is community focused, I think is really, really important. And so I have to say thank you so much, Cynthia. We need to find out where to find you. So I'll have all of this in my show notes on my website at janejacksoncoach.com. But tell us, if someone wants to hop on and find out more about you and your business, where do they go?
Okay, so if you'd like to find out about the International Business Accelerator, you just go to internationalbusinessaccelerator.com. It's a little long, I know, but we couldn't get IBA. It was already taken. So internationalbusinessaccelerator.com. And if you want to go to the open day, you just add /open-day to the end of it. And if you would like to find out about Dearin and Associates more generally, you just go to Dearin, DEARIN associates.com.
Perfect. And also, if anyone wants to follow you on Twitter, it's Cynthia Dearin. I'll have that link as well in my show notes. So let's follow Cynthia on Twitter too. So any parting messages, Cynthia?
Look, I would just say, if you're thinking about taking your business international, don't be afraid. It's easier than you think. And if we're talking about your career, I just say make sure that you do something that you love. Be brave and don't be discouraged if things don't work out exactly how you think they're going to. And if you don't go in a straight line, well, that's okay. There are many ways to be right. If you have to do a zigzag to get where you want to go, or even if you wind up somewhere totally different, as long as you're waking up every day happy and enjoying what you're doing, that is really all that matters.
Can I just add that it might be a good idea not to go to a war zone?
It depends what you're trying to get done.
Well, yes, exactly. Okay. You've had such a fascinating life, and I have to say thank you to your parents for encouraging you to do all of these amazing things. It's been so interesting having you on the show. Thank you so much, Cynthia. And I reckon in, say, 2 quarters' time, you should come back and let's find out how the IBA has gone.
I'd love to do that. That'd be fantastic.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Cynthia.
Thanks, Jane.
Talk soon.
Bye.
If you'd like to find out how coaching can help you, visit janejacksoncoach.com, where not only will you be able to listen to other fascinating interviews from professionals who've made amazing career changes, you'll also be able to download some free ebooks and guides on how to manage your career effectively.
You've been listening to Jane Jackson Careers. Sign up to receive regular career advice at janejacksoncoach.com.